Greetings, YouTube. It's hard to listen to the news lately without somebody talking about the opioid crisis in America. It's been going all across the nation, fueled by big pharma's desire to flood as much of the medical market as possible with as many pills as they can produce. Any legal pills, of course. Um, but they had like one instance where reporters found that there were like 9 million pills being flooded into a town that had 1,000 people. So yeah, I'm thinking they made it to the black market, but maybe they're just really high. Um, and of course, when people can't get access to their prescription meds or find them on the black market, they're going to turn to other forms of opioids such as heroin to get their fix. That's how addiction works. Interesting side note, which one of the states that has had opioid use fall? It's Colorado. I wonder why. But I find it interesting that I have heard in fact, I've heard nobody, not on an NPR or any of the mainstream news channels, discussing the fact or comparing the drug problems of opioids with cocaine. Because there was a cocaine crisis in America, a really big one at one time. Huge. But nobody talked about it in the same terms they're talking about the opioid crisis. The opioid crisis has opened up all kinds of new treatment centers. They're talking about drug courts and trying to give people more of a break and how will their insurance pay for their treatment and things like that. That's not how we talked about cocaine. Now, we probably could think about why that is. For example, powdered cocaine got much different sentencing structures than did crack cocaine, rock cocaine. Why? Because white people use powder cocaine and black people, for the most part, were the main market for rock or crack cocaine. And instead of getting more treatment centers and people being concerned about how the users were going to get their insurance to cover their treatment so they could kick their habit, we sent them to prison and we ruined their lives. Because the one thing that an addict needs most in life is a criminal record, making sure that they can never get a decent job again. Can you hear the sarcasm in my voice? And that's the reason the opioid crisis is getting a much softer treatment than the cocaine crisis. Because most of the people using the opioids are white. Sure, there are black people using it, but black people make up a minority in America. And most of the people using those opioids are pale. And so they're in a crisis. But when we talked about the cocaine crisis, the response was draconian police state actions. Opioid crisis, medical treatments, drug courts, finding ways of keeping people out of prison. So funnily enough, it's not okay to put white people in prison for being opioid addicts, but it is okay to put black people in prison for being cocaine addicts. Now remember, I don't think that there should ever been a criminal penalty for drug use. Drug addiction should be a medical, not a criminal action. It should not even be a civil fine. There should be no legal action whatsoever for the users of drugs. None. You want to go after the sellers and nail them with impurity laws, things like that? I got no problem with that. But I don't even think selling drugs, if they're of pharmaceutical quality, should be a crime. People want to use drugs. What we need to do is address the reasons that people use drugs. But that's a really big problem, and nobody wants to take on that problem. They don't want to take on systemic racism, systemic misogyny, systemic toxic masculinity, systemic economic disparities. They don't want to deal with that. They want simple solutions. They'd rather treat the symptoms than go after the problem. But you can't deny the fact that America is treating the opioid crisis far differently than it treated the cocaine crisis. And it's all about racism. And it sickens me. And it bugs the crap out of me that I have not heard any news agencies talking about this. Why is some fat old white dude on YouTube discussing it when CNN and the ABC and not even TYT, the Young Turks Network, is discussing this? Why is nobody talking about this? because they don't want to.